Je suis ici pour...
James, I'm so excited to be with you here today in New York and to talk to you in person.
It is my pleasure, absolutely.
Oh, it's so wonderful. So let's dive right into it. The last apotheosis was Surav Gupta.
Right.
And Surav wrote a very beautiful piece about King Ashoka and how he conquered the world to establish Buddhism. But also, the topic of the interview was the power of structure and how structure is actually connected to freedom in beautiful poetry and in all art endeavors. So my question to you is that do you have an observation that you want to share with Surav, or do you have a question for him directly?
An observation, and my friends who have written not in the discipline of being a poet, but trying to make themselves write a sonnet, and they don't necessarily write a sonnet, and shared with me, wow, what a trip. You've got to make sure all 140 or so syllables count. And that makes you think in a different way. And that leads to your concision and diction and precision and whatnot. So whether that is what's called freeing, I say, oh, I don't know if it's freeing or not. And then I actually mentioned this in playing the audience toward the beginning of the book, to be free to come up with the answer in doing a crossword puzzle. If you have a word for pleasure, a moment of pleasure, and you have X number of letters, you have no clue. But once you start getting the E and the J and the Y, then the solution comes, oh, enjoyment.
Absolutely.
But without that form, those restrictions, it's not, so the freedom to do anything, sure, but the freedom to do what's going to take you to where it's fruitful.
Yes, absolutely.
Form can help, and restriction can help you so much.
Absolutely.
Another great example, Stephen Sondheim, the composer lyricist, mentioned, you can't really write a song about a lady at a bar, but you can write a song about a lady at the end of the bar in the red dress having her sixth martini at 4 p.m.
So true.
So you render it specific, and then boom, the thing opens up.
Specific and precision.
Right.
Yeah.
But it opens up where you're still nagged, or the bug bites for you to develop.
Absolutely.
What's going on. But if you have all the freedom in the world, you don't do anything.
Is that how do you articulate the need or the imperative to have a structure when you write a poem, and the desire to have more freedom in that? How do you do that when you write a poem?
Well, freedom to a great extent to me is attitude. So what in French, Rimbaud and Verlaine called vers libre, but that word libre is not the same as what the Americans think of as free when they say free verse. And so I don't use the term free verse because too many people mean unfree verse, meaning you're not free to use rhyme, meter, repetition, or a received form. If you're not free, it's not free verse. What they really mean is unmetric, unrhymed, unrepetitive, unformed.
This is true.
But even the great prose writers use anaphora, epistrophe, repetition, parallel structure, and Allen Ginsberg in his great poem Howl from the 1950s has an anaphora sections of the poem that will all start with the same phrase. So those sections read with very common language. It gives it a pitch of a higher language that's like an anthem or like scripture or like an official document. The proclamation that starts with whereas, comma, boom, and whereas, or the Old Testament.
And
the King, it starts with and. I think every chapter at the beginning. I forget now. It's been so long since I've read the King James. But they start using that anaphora or the repetition at the beginning of a sentence or clause, gives it a pitch with very natural language. Hemingway does the same thing. His repetitions are exquisite. So I'm very much enamored with poetic prose and poetry that doesn't use simile and metaphor, or even symbol, but contrives the story. And you see this in all of our Fires of Heaven, blatant talking, but in such a structure that it lifts different ways in achieving poetic prose or poetry, and they're not all what your creative writing teachers might have told you.